Growing up, Native mother, African American father, tell me when those cultures start to come into play for you or come into vision, into clarity for you.
I would say um, one of my earliest memories, gosh, I was 3 or 4, and I was a flower girl in my Auntie Nellie's wedding. And my Auntie Nellie is my mom's sister. And her wedding was in Tuntatuliak, which is where my mother was born and raised. It's a tiny village of, at the time when she was born, 300 people on the Kuskokwim River. It's only accessible by boat or plane year round.
Wow.
And I remember my mom made this like light pink dress. I grew up a tomboy, so I couldn't believe she had me wear that, but I wore this light pink dress. And we flew from the big city to my mom's village, and my dad was there, all my brothers, my aunties and uncles on my mom's side. And I just remember looking out to the crowd, because my mother married. So both my parents are pastors.
Okay.
And my mother married my Auntie Nellie and my Uncle Paul. And I remember standing there just looking, being 3 or 4. And then I see my dad and was looking at the crowd and realizing, oh, my dad's the only Black guy here. But that was really it. And then when we went to Anchorage to what I called Black church, my parents were both ordained in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, and I was baptized in AB Zion. I noticed that every time after church on Sunday, we had a feast of all different types of food. And it was mainly, I guess, what the traditional, well, I mean, maybe it's traditional, but after church on Sunday, it was black-eyed peas, ham hock, fried chicken, collard greens, apple pie. It was all these things that were just like really yummy food that I loved. But then I saw, oh, at this church, everyone's Black, and my mom's the only Native person. But no, she's not, because I'm Native too. Okay. And so I remember being, from a young age, like really understanding I'm two different things, but I don't know what it means, but my parents tell me I'm special, so I believe it.
Wow, wonderful. But you in our story that we wrote in Cuisine Noire, you remember her making Eskimo ice cream.
Yes.
And just, so it wasn't that there was an emphasis on, I'm Native American, your dad is Black. They were just raising you in both of their cultures and just going about showering you with that love, which
yes, absolutely. In our household, my brothers and I knew every single day we were Native, Alaska Native, and we were Black. And my mother still ate her traditional Native food, even though she didn't live in the village anymore. We had lots of freezers in the garage and the refrigerator, and then outside these big coffin-looking freezers, because they're all subsistence living, so we were filled with caribou and moose and seal, fish, salmon, halibut, like all the things that my mother ate. And she shared that obviously with her family.
Right.
And it wasn't until I would say the very first time I realized I was different was in 2nd grade. My teacher's name was Miss Carr, and my best friend at the time, her name was Trista. I don't remember her last name, but I just remember, the first names. And I came home from school one day, and my parents at dinner time would always ask us, how did your day go? And it was my turn. And I remember just, I passed out birthday cards with Trista for her birthday party coming up this weekend. And my parents asked me, can we see Trista's birthday invitation? And I said, I didn't get one because I'm Black. But I don't know what that means, because I'm brown. And all of a sudden, I just remember my parents immediately, dinner was pretty much over at that time. They wanted to know exactly what happened at school. Who did we give invitations to? And then the next day at school, my parents drove my brothers and I to school. And I remember sitting outside the principal's office, of all places, and I'm staring at my classmate Trista. My parents and her parents are having a war of words with one another in the principal's office. Then eventually we were called into the principal's office. And all I remember hearing was, my daughter is no longer allowed to play with your daughter. Okay. And then Trista and her mother left the principal's office. she was transferred to another class. She was no longer in Mrs. Carr's class.
Oh,
She went to another
wow.
second grade. And then I started crying, so I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know what I did wrong. And
Mhm.
then my parents that night explained to my brothers and I, especially me, like, well, so Charity, you're right. Like you said, well, I'm not black, I'm brown. Because when I looked at my skin in second grade, it's like,
Mhm.
oh, well, I'm brown. I
Mhm.
didn't know what black meant.
Right, right.
And so that was the first time my parents really sat me down and told me, like, this is what Alaska Native means. This is what Yupik means. This is what black means. This is what being African American means.
Mhm.
This is your native name. This is where you were born. This is why we eat our native food. You know, it was, and I remember it being really overwhelming. But also, again, it defined me, meaning I will never forget that.
Right,
It was the
right.
first time I realized I was different. But then my parents wove it so beautifully to where you're special.
Mhm.
Um, God made you just the way you are. And you might experience this again in your life, but you know what to do, you know what to say. And if you have any questions, you know, contact us or your school administrators. Like they taught us like safety.
Right.
Um, and anyways, I don't know if that answered your question in terms of
Yes.
understanding, you know, like our cultural values in our home, but we were
Right,
definitely raised to know exactly who we are and
right.
where we and what we stood for.
And to
And
be
I would
proud of
say,
it.
yeah, and I would say that little moment in second grade probably and most definitely has attributed to why I believe in the work that I do,
Mhm.
and that all people are created kindly and equally, and especially, I mean, gosh, I'm so in a weird way, I'm so thankful that happened in second grade and not high school. Because by the time
Right.
high school came, I really did have a strong backbone. I knew exactly who I was. But had I not had that backbone, that could have been the detriment of the rest of my